Do you own an electric vehicle? Do you own an electric vehicle? Are you one of those people driving down the road past the gas station, smugly thinking, at least I'm not paying for gas? Or do you think, at least I'm not destroying the planet so long as I don't think about the coal-fired plant powering my car? If you are one of those people who drives your electric vehicle and thinks you're saving money, Clark Howard, I need you to know, according to Jalopnik, right now, driving 100 miles in an electric vehicle is more expensive than driving an internal combustion engine car. Because of energy prices in this country, gas prices have gone down some, but electric utility prices have gone up for the wintertime as it's gotten cold all over the country. With the February always tends to get cold. Turns out the Anderson Economic Group found that the fueling costs for an internal combustion engine right now are lower than comparable electric vehicles in terms of size. So you get a mid-size sedan that runs on gas and a mid-size sedan that runs on a battery. Your gas car is outperforming in terms of cost. Fascinating. Now, this is a problem, is it not, for electric vehicle uptake? And there is a movement afoot to try to drive up the costs of petroleum in this country. Joe Biden wanting to restrict supply in this country. And the theory from the left is that if they subsidize electric vehicles and they make gas-powered vehicles more expensive to use because they've raised gas prices, people will go to the electric vehicle. This is the government shaping the supply and demand curve to pick the winners and losers. The problem is right now, gas prices have gone down. Now, they're coming up. My buddy Drew just texted me. Yes, Drew, I've just talked about you on my program. No, not that Drew, different Drew. And he was saying, why are gas, he lives up in North Carolina. He's like, have you heard anything? Why are gas prices all of a sudden so high again? Well, so I looked it up because I hadn't heard, and where I live, gas prices are actually down from where they were. My kids have remarked on it, how low gas prices have gotten, but there are some refineries on the East Coast due to cold weather. They had some frozen pipes and the like, water pipes and stuff that burst, and they have had to shut down and suspend refining operations. That's caused gas prices to go up in some parts of the country, including along the eastern seaboard. But overall, generally now, gas prices across the country are much lower than they had been. Still not as low as when Trump was president, but low enough. And electricity prices are so high that it's costing people more to be in an electric vehicle than an industrial internal combustion engine. Now, that gets to the next point. David Gaddy, he's at the University of Georgia. He testified before Congress yesterday. And he has this piece in National Interest, and it's probably the most important piece you haven't read. And I would encourage you, in all seriousness, text data to 33777 and get my show notes. We have the link to this piece in it from David Gaddy and Michael Hewitt. And I want to read you just the beginning. I don't want to read all of this. I want to summarize it, but here's the headline. Energy sovereignty will be the Westphalian principle of the 21st century. At the end of the Cold War, it appeared democracy had won the final battle in civilization's perpetual struggle between individual liberty and authoritarianism. Some even raised the possibility democracy had prevailed and history had ended. However, revisionist powers, China and Russia, have revived and now threaten to bring history back with a vengeance. The latest evidence is the recently released joint statement of the Russian Federation and People's Republic of China. International relations entering a new era and global sustainable development. This is the vision these two authoritarian powers have for the 21st century world order. And with a few word substitutions, it might fool many in the West into believing it was written by U.S.-European Union diplomatic alliance as the two powers twist Western philosophical and ideological verbiage into what could be considered as democracy with communist characteristics. Now, I misspoke. I should tell you that this piece actually came out last year. He testified before Congress yesterday. David Gaddy did, the author. But this piece, though a year old, is very prescient in what's happening here. This piece was written as Russia was preparing to go into Ukraine. Here's what's going on. China is having natural gas shortages right now. It is leading a lot of people in China to consider riots again, much like they did with the COVID lockdowns. People in China are very unhappy. People are literally freezing to death in China right now because they do not have natural gas. In China, they have pressured a number of switches in power, including some power plants they forced to shut down in favor of natural gas fired power plants. Instead of burning coal, burning natural gas for China to lower its emissions. Now those natural gas plants are short of natural gas to be able to cause power, and so the power is going out at night. Natural gas is not flowing into homes to power heaters, water heaters, home heaters, and furnaces, so people are freezing at night. Some people have literally frozen to death overnight in China because of these natural gas shortages. Russia is trying to build pipelines now into China. Those two countries had long had contentious relations, but President Xi and President Putin are getting together. The United States, meanwhile, is running essentially a Berlin airlift to Europe to try to make sure it has sufficient natural gas now that Russia has called off its natural gas supplies. But concurrent to that, Europe, thankfully, has had a warmer than normal winter, while China has had a colder than normal winter. The result of this is that energy prices in Europe are not as bad as energy prices in China. Energy shortages in Europe are not really bad. In China, they are very bad. This country is blessed with vast resources of oil and natural gas. After Saudi Arabia, now it is believed we have the largest oil reserves in the world, and some experts believe we have larger oil reserves than Saudi Arabia. Unfortunately, we have progressives in this country that do not want us to pull the oil out of the ground. We have progressives in the White House who do not want us to build natural gas pipelines to flow natural gas for export or for use domestically. We have a fear of fossil fuels in this country driven by left-wing anxiety over climate change. And this piece from last year and the testimony from yesterday all highlight something we should be thinking about. Energy is going to be the make or break for the next century. Countries that have access to reserves of energy are going to do better than those who don't, particularly as those energy reserves are used to shape alliances around the world. China is going to provide energy, and the Russians are going to provide energy to a number of countries. China will fund the purchases, Russia will do the deliveries, and together they will be able to persuade these countries, hey, instead of paying us, let us take over your lithium mine. Hey, instead of paying us, how about we rebuild your airport, but you allow us to station a few jets there? This is what they're already doing. There's a story out of Africa that Zambia is indebted to China, and the Biden administration is having to step in and try to get them to restructure their loans because China is trying to tell Zambia, if you default on the loans, we get military bases in your country, and we get all of your rare earth mineral mines. The Zambians are a very wealthy nation when it comes to copper, lithium, cobalt, and others, but their people live on $2 a day. And the Chinese are saying, we will forgive your debts, but you have to give us all your rare earth minerals. You see, what's happening here is China is beginning to develop alliances around the world where the allies are indebted to China. They may not want it, but China gave them money and they're honoring their obligations. And so China gets to station troops, tanks, planes, ships. In Sri Lanka, China helped them build their airport. Sri Lanka defaulted, and now China gets a military installation in the Indian Ocean for the first time, very near our military installations in the Indian Ocean. And meanwhile, in this country, because of a fear of global warming, we are increasingly dependent on solar and wind power that is irregular power that will cause us to start having an energy crisis. On top of that, there's a story out from Real Clear Energy. Christopher Bernard. The nuclear energy community was abuzz with news of a nuclear fusion breakthrough at the end of last year. Yet while fusion innovations offer the promise of a bright future, there's a more pertinent issue facing the industry, an antiquated regulatory environment that's stifling clean nuclear energy development. The Vogtle Energy Generating Plant in Georgia made headlines when its new Unit 3 began loading fuel in October of last year. But after a minor setback during pre-operational testing, Georgia Power was left with no choice but to file a license amendment for the plant through the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. A seemingly small problem, vibrations that require a pipe brace, is set to cost the company $1 million per day, and is estimated that relicensing will take at least a month. Needless to say, there's absolutely no reason why adding a pipe brace should cost Georgia Power more than $30 million. Often, nuclear energy is criticized for being too expensive, or more specifically, having sky-high upfront costs. But many of these costs are completely unnecessary. Plant Vogel's Units 3 and 4 are the first nuclear reactors to be constructed in the United States in more than 3 decades, and it's no wonder. Overregulation and the absurd cost, both time-wise and financially, of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission permitting process are stopping clean, safe nuclear energy in its tracks. We are scared to use our resources. While the Chinese and Russians, the Iranians are working in concert together to expand the deployment of their resources to build alliances and a new world order. We can get ahead of this because the strings that come attached to our power for the world are far less onerous than those of China, Russia, and Iran. But the left in this country refuses to allow us to unleash these resources both domestically and internationally. If we do not soon realize we need to start be not just the arsenal of democracy, but the gas station of democracy, we're going to be left behind by some very anti-democratic authoritarian governments. And right now, Joe Biden, this is on you, and you need to do the right thing, which is to ignore the climate change hysterics.